Sumba dame dubi shirab nyeba gunga nyembu juzu tenpa di tsarwa. Kazangdu di tsaswa. Tadiri sumba dame dubi shirab danzingi nyembu yinba lu tsoba bonga asa.
Last time we finished showing how the wisdom realizing showing how the wisdom realizing selflessness becomes an antidote to all faults. And so now and then third, again, replying to objections about it being an antidote to self-grasping.
Ta tingwengi nga zo tsawe subject di la dame dubi shirab nyeba dame dubi shirab khomba li nyeba maluwa pang slabdi nyeba thamjigi nyeba khandisin chagiri se zoba di zorwa. Ta thanda de la di len de la ranglu gi nyeba kungi nyembo li gyurwi gyunzen di nyeba thamjigi tsawa danzen re do dame dubi shirab danzen da zinangi warwa asta ranglu gi len di kyabwa. Ta tela zoba zoba re.
So this one, in the earlier section, which is showing how it becomes an antidote to all faults, there was an explanation that it becomes an antidote to all faults because its mode of apprehension, or the way is mode of apprehension okay? Can we just use that as a standard term? Yeah, because its mode of apprehension is directly contradictory with that of ignorance. And so after presenting this as the reason why it is an antidote, this next section is addressing the Buddhist, the Acharya Dharmakirti's presentation of why it is an antidote, because, so our presentation is, it is an antidote because its mode of apprehension is directly contradictory. This objection is to that point of it being an antidote because it is directly contradictory in the way it apprehends.
Kachi, dame to be sherab danzin do zindan gewa zamgi nyimbu yina, deja da kondo ni pinzu nyimbu gyuru shena house.
And so in the commentary it says, someone objects by saying, if the reason for the wisdom realizing selflessness being the antidote to self-grasping was solely the fact that its mode of apprehension contradicts the other's mode of apprehension, both attachment and aversion would also be antidotes of each other.
Ta deja di yul yidu wang la chugurwa. Ani shedan di ta deja yul chug yundi yidu wang do tachi. Yidu wang namba thoni chugurwa. Shedan di yul chug yundi yidu miwon thoni chugurwa. Yidu miwon ta dugur do tagwa ta midugur do tagwa. Dugur do tagwa le deja gi namba chugurwa. Midugur do tagwa le tene shedan gi namba chugurwa. So that dugo da midubani gyawado shitwa. Ti indu kanani desha da shedang nyebo di ani desha gi nyebo la shedang nyebo desha gom na ani tigirwas kajina kuni nyebo charu gurwas. Kerang dangzin da dame do besher zinang gewa gi nyebo ilaba ina desha da shedang nyebo di nyebo charu gudu usta kaji gi zabatir.
Kinga da tikadula jota di chinjilo gi jota la kogur.
Ale dos la shin de tada kande la.
Injila ngajo nang biti sama di truk di chik pa charu do chinjilo gi jota.
Chinjilo ta lamna digri malam nei digri ngala idi won to ta shin lan digri.
So the objection that they have is with the modes of apprehension of two different minds, and because attachment's mode of apprehension requires, or not requires, but attachment arises when there is a superimposition of a pleasantness or something pleasing, whereas aversion arises after there is a superimposition of something unpleasant or the thing looks not pleasant, not pleasing anymore. When you look at attachment and aversion, it also seems like their ways of perceiving their objects and their modes of apprehension, one coming from a superimposition of something pleasant and the other coming from a superimposition of an unpleasant aspect. It seems that their modes of apprehension are also contradictory with each other, which is why here there's this objection that then these two will also end up becoming antidotes of each other.
Ale da di baro di shena ya ku yoso do zawa shera gi thanda nga zo zawa shera mare Shigebe dine atanda 제바지와 시제비 다데 나로라 땅아 치디 심어지 좀 하소 다 가장 먼저 차과 좀 보면 숨쉬지 계제 셰인바 다 디나로는 단다 가수 봐봐디 율을 차과디 다 율을 차과디 계제 셰인인데 딘디기 유텔라 ngöla yudi yido hongmyong khari yindami khebake mewashe ngöla yudi tong lo chike yudi tong lo ke yungdu dindigi yutela da tsumi yiji namdo gi dukbar rota sona di juktola yutela migbe dechache yudi tunyi gi dumbam yudi tomna sambado dindigi yudi la gawi namba jingi decha dok chukro yache kede yutela tsumi yiji namdogi yidu myungo rota sona yidu myungo rota ba yinba ina ani tele tene yutela shadangi namba chukro yache yutela magawa namba chukro ya tene yutela gyabgi chobe namba ketro ya oda di yungu yor.
So this might be helpful to kind of clarify there is this commentary to Aryadeva's 400 verses by Acharya Chandrakirti where he's explaining the kind of order in which attachment arises. And so here the attachment that we're talking about is attachment directed at an object. What do we call that? Incorrect attention? Is that what we call it? Inappropriate attention. So first, the way it's described is, first there is an object that is perceived before it is perceived as pleasant or unpleasant. There's a perception of an object and an object appears, then there is this inappropriate attention, and if the inappropriate attention superimposes a sense of pleasantness to it or something it looks attractive or appealing, then after that attachment which has the wish to kind of appropriate it, or attachment that wants to have that thing, arises in the next moment. So there's the object that's perceived, there is the superimposition of a pleasantness to that object that happens by inappropriate attention, which then leads to attachment arising towards it. Similarly, if the inappropriate attention superimposes an unpleasantness or something that is unattractive as a quality of that thing, then as a result of that, the mind that wishes to be separated from that or wishes to be distanced from that. So then the mind takes on an aspect of wanting to be separated from that object, which then is aversion.
Ta yu koran la tsumi yiji namdo gi yidu honwa da miwa dro taya keje she yungdu yu koran la ani yidu hon miwa gi number chik koran la da yoda mes keje she ba ina yu koran la yidu hon miwa keje she yorta yor ina yu te la yidu hon miwa keje she ga ro yundu yidu hon miwa di karigan keje she warta bagi yudi 닝점도 디 닝점은 민도 세야도 디 두버도 디 미도 거래샤 세야도 먼저 계제시가 로윤데 유 코란강니 디체 자에 계제시에 요리 요 말에 남긴 먼저 계제시에도 가지고 남긴 행길을 먼저 계제시에디 그러봐 디시가 로윤데 유 코란기 키주지 원에 코란라 디 계제시 가지고 시가 로고 요르베 양 아란수에게 로기 통단지인 아니 계제시에도
Then when you say that, like the word that is used, I think you've all heard this many times, there is a superimposition. We keep saying there's superimposition of attractiveness or unattractiveness. And if the question, like naturally what one is going to want to figure out is, when you say there is a superimposition of attractiveness or there is a superimposition of an unattractiveness, this is a very innate kind of thing. It's not like there's a lot of thought behind it. The question is, are these qualities things that are actually there or not? And so the answer is yes, there is a level of pleasantness or unpleasantness, attractiveness and unattractiveness in objects. And so that's not what here is being addressed. What's being addressed is the way in which they come to be pleasant or unpleasant or attractive or unattractive. And so in the analysis that one is doing, one isn't really concerned about whether they are or not unattractive or attractive, but how they come to hold or how they come to have these qualities. And so the analysis is, which one needs to do is, when something is attractive, the way in which it appears is very naturally attractive, but that attractiveness that it has, or that pleasant appearance aspect that it has, is that something that is spoken of in relation to perception, or is it something that is not spoken of in relation to perception, but some sort of quality that precedes or is unrelated to how then it comes to be perceived?
다단다 엄마 탄주웨기 탄예기 남사 조당이 토는 간조 이도 오모 계제 셰직다 요래 이나다 단다 딩가조 계제 셰 먹어왔지 탄주비 계제 딩가조 먹어왔지 단다 다단다데 배추기 타비 룩나 신이 제지다 간다 도디베기 단다 단다디 디춥다디 조당나 신이 지는 간조 계제 셰가 침바 이나다 빼나 쑥 미다바 쑥이 계제 다 수기 랑신라 미다바 여러와 소 미다바의 수기 랑신기 켜져로와 디낭신 아니 나조 오부 통대 수진기 오부 통대 간디지 인바는 수다간다 수그라티로라 레자라 소바 간디지 인바이네요 코론 랑신 코론라 이동와 세식 당가다 수글라 랑치소 미다바기 랑신지 여번 랑신 이동와 세디 딘디르부지 여러베스 디티워직레 덴데르부지 여르베 야 수코란라 랑신 덴데지 매바체 아니 이동원 강 통대디 이동원 이나다 이동묘원 이나다 강 통대버디 마란주 르기 안 딱바 지부지레 디티워직다.
So please don't make this error in judgment, because there is a prasangika way of talking about it which exists, but we're not doing that. So a prasangika way of saying things have certain qualities or they don't have certain qualities, we're not doing that. So don't bring that in right now. According to the system that we're following, which is Acharya Dharmakirti's system, according to this system, when we're analyzing, we're following this way of looking at things. And so the question now is, when form comes to exist, simultaneous with form, there is also a quality or an attribute of impermanence that is inherent to form, or it is simultaneous with form. And so we can say the nature of form is to be impermanent, because if you remember the divisions of substantially one, there was substantially one. Do you remember all those different divisions? There is that level of being substantially one which is simultaneous with it. So because form has qualities such as impermanence and others that are simultaneous, substantially one in that way, or the nature of form in that way, what we're checking over here is, when we say form has a pleasantness or has an attractiveness, is that quality, like the quality of impermanence, something that exists with form as its nature, that is always inextricably tied with it, such as impermanence and those other qualities that we had seen last year? Or is it something that comes to be because the mind designates it to be so?
So
which one do you think it would be? Huh? That, yeah, but how? Is it from the object?
Ah. Kete yu koran la mitagwa na shin che yu koran gi rangshin mitagwa ge che sha na shin ngaran so yido wa da yido mi wa kang tong de ba da yido wa tong yi nga zo tong yi ngo bu chik do wa yido mi wa tong de ngo bu chik do wa da ben de dil nga zo yido wa tong da ben de dil thang da yido wa tong yu na di yido wa di ani thang da mo di koran gi rangshin so do koran rangshin so chub de ba so do shi din de ji yin la ba yin na 아니 딜러 뉴저 가려요.
게 랑체 기타니.
랑셰라나 다 그런 단계를 랑신 게
나니 혼수 디카도 조로게 케바토베 웨타다 케바다보 웨타디는 랑시 게지 요로게 딜랍고이나
말은 디그스.
do you remember so like for instance with that cup if like the impermanence of that cup there's this word which is a quality that is of its own essence, yeah, but again of its own essence in the sense that from its very conception, from its very existence, that other quality is with it. That's what we're talking about, okay? So if if that cup was looking pleasant and attractive, if the attractiveness of that cup, much like the impermanence of that cup, was a quality that always accompanies that cup, what kind of objections could you have in terms of reasoning? Like what reason could you suggest or use to say that would be not true?
Some people might think that's ugly.
딜라나 아니 미다바 주지 수 미다바 수기랑 지수 매르베 가시기 따고 통구도 왔라나.
So then you could argue, well, say, then take impermanence, it follows it is not that kind of quality of the cup because some people see it as permanent.
What about, when something's in fashion and then you say that design is or that color is in and so you like the yellow cup, and then next year maybe blue is more in so you don't like the yellow cup. So it's the same perception but use it differently over.
또 참참 직단라 가시 거랑 직단라 아주 닝정을 차려 fashionable 차려 줘요. fashionable 차는데 미상을 이동을 차. 아니 그런 fashionable 많이 버차는데 이동을 미용을 차용 것도. 또 계속 그런 란체 수요비인데 이거 가지는 fashionable 통고 그래서.
직버와 미다바에는 정말 미다바는 가디는 미다바 통고를 베스.
It's the same, no? If something was then if the property of that cup was to be impermanent was a quality that always followed the cup, then everyone would always have to see it impermanent, but people don't always see it impermanent. Same thing.
What about the same person?
Huh?
The same person, same object is the same object now and half a year later the object is another.
또 미직라 까르는 수. 미직이 나르데 통 제라 샴파통. 리미타고 집어래.
컨데사.
단다딩은 건조께서 쉐디 마운체고 강사 제자바 통주 제자발을 지시해보라. 딱 강사 민라와 니 많이 버지 강사 지그란 지글라 키드로나. 고랑게 통주 연구 규르기레스.
또 규르기레스나.
리미타고란 집어래.
제. 규르기레스라나 다 딜라거와. 갑직라 닝지 모통. 갑직라 두주직라 닝지 모통. 그냥 두주직라 닝지 모 마통. 난 두주직라 닝지 모통. 다 통담 민라와 숨 콜레바이나. 다 유코랑게 랑싱 오마디 닝지모 마이비 주제 가르시아오래. 두즈질랭이 닝지모 마이바 통웨시 니디 라바이나 이따 캬바요르베스.
So would there be perversion? Like the same person sees it attractive, then they see it unpleasant, then they see it as pleasant again. Is it fair to say it follows it doesn't have the quality of being pleasant as a quality that is always accompanying it because there are moments where I don't see it as pleasant? Is there perversion in that reason? Huh? Yeah? If I don't see it as pleasant, it follows it doesn't have that quality of being pleasant? No, but is there perversion generally?
If the cup breaks, or I was thinking about this example where you look at your nails and you say, oh, they're gorgeous nails, and the nail gets cut and you're like, it's no longer gorgeous. Because the quality of gorgeous is something that you put on it. It doesn't exist with the cut nail. It only existed.
But that's not the nail anymore, no? It's a different thing. Like if the cup breaks, it's not. Yeah, because you can say the cup is yellow, the cup has this shape. If it breaks, those also go away. So it's not enough to say that if something it breaks, if other qualities go away, they're not of the same nature with that. That also doesn't work, no?
다 단단가서 가리 디스커션 치고라나. 간조기 통대기 이동 세계제 셰리에디. 갑코란을 예르베 마란수기 삼로기 차르낭레스. 당가도 딜랑가도 단다 돌링 치고.
So what we're discussing right now is the attractiveness of a cup that we see or the pleasantness that we see Is it a quality that the cup has from the very beginning, or is it a quality that you speak of in relation to one's appearance or to how it looks to you? That's what the question is. But what's the reason for it?
단다 버동 간주 디삼당기 요 말에 간주 가리 인지 뭐 통바에는 유딜에 유샤샤라고 지게지 시에는 간주 섬당디고 없다.
콘주디 샘기 차주 요샤샤지.
말다 남중 간주 롤 행gel에 디 삼당 마 코기 말에.
So generally, ordinarily, no one really feels that it is a quality that has anything to do with one's mind. Everyone feels that these are qualities that things have of their own. This thing of it being subjective is not really something that anyone feels.
간주 총한라 돈이 잘라 녀가 두디 간라 잘라디 인지 뭐 도민도 간데도 따가 도용데 니 삼로 니기 로기 차당 간 삼로 코르게 칼음 콤보레.
Like when you go to buy clothes, no one goes into a shop saying which clothes look attractive to me. You go looking for good clothes, things that are nice. So the idea that everything you see is in relation to your own perception, no one has that. Naturally, innately, no one has that.
A mother always thinks her baby is the cutest baby in the world.
Oh.
And it may not be the cutest baby at all.
Yeah, but the mother doesn't think that that baby is cute to me. Thinks the baby is cute. There's a difference between, yeah. So it's not like no one feels that it's from my point of view.
다 기시 단다 ngaran 속이 통대게 이도와도 이도 미원 생에도 유코란을 짠이 매딩이지 이나. 그런 가지고 이도 통 대가랑 가지고 가래래 ngaran 줄르기 좋다 요스다.
If one feels that whatever is attractive or unattractive is not a quality of this sort with things, that itself will lead to knowing that it's imputed. So,
다 기시 르기 통나다 르기 로다 게제 민버체 오보 코란라 이도원지 열에라나 오보 코란라 이도원 유비 줍제 가르고 그러 어디다 디섬다.
so try and see why, if something was a quality, like if being pleasant was a quality of a thing and not in relation to one's appearance, then how would you say, or what reasons would you give for saying that that's a quality of the thing? That's something that one kind of has to find a reason for that.
땅 가지고 오보딜라 미다바 여바 오보딜라 규여바 디릭부당 룹투구스 땅 오보딜라 이도 여바 지 룹다슬라나 딱 가르고가 딩오보딜라 이도 여바 다 딩오보딜라 규여바 가지고 룹투구래 규여바 손상 기지기 지고 룹투구래 이네 딩오보딜라 이도 여바 간디스투과.
For instance, proving that that cup has causes is something that you can use a reason to prove. Similarly, if you can prove that it has causes, you can use that now as a reason to show that it is disintegrating. So there are certain things that you can actually give reasons to support what that thing has as a quality. But if you were to prove that it has a pleasant quality, what reason do you give? Like what valid reason do you have to give that it has that quality? What's the reason to, no, give me a reason for saying that quality, that is a quality of that thing. A thing is attractive because? Yeah, like the pot is impermanent because, the pot has causes because, that is attractive because. There should be a reason for that.
Because of the design, the design is the particular way that it's treated.
입 개발진도 돈 요래 요.
Even ugly things have particular shapes, no?
야 입디 야가래서 게제 샤가 도거와. 야 입디 야가래서 게제 샤가도 입디 야가 이마에 루지 샤거와.
Instead, if you mean like some shapes are nicer than others or better than others, like the way they're combined, then that also needs further proof, no? Like this is better because, so what's the reason for that?
Because you generalize that everyone finds it to be that. So it's not me, but it's a commonly understood thing that is.
민망해지라. 다 민망하기로 민망하기 닝지 못통데. 아니 미치기 닝지 못 와서 돈이 통계요나. 다 망용이 돈이 아니 고민이 때는 파보르베.
So then proving the nature of things becomes like, what is it, consensus, no?
다 디나시 ngobu dile kiju shamba kharin ro manga gi khari thongba ina tabena mi manga gi ko yabu du la mi chi gi ko ngune dugja yo ha ko ba ina ta demba khari stel phapur.
So if the majority of everyone feels that someone is good, and then one person realizes that they're actually not good or not honest, is that like, how are you going to prove which one is real or not? If it was a question of consensus, majority.
Ni keranju sangmal gogor tan ro adi shapha pi wi shabi kyun sangmal gogor na kyun zo nga yago shu thong adi sha ngi ngune thong de na keranju thong na shi ngune de mi ba ko thong de na ta sudam ba zu.
So if apart from Atisha, I've managed to fool all of you, and all of you see me to be some, like you all really find me, like I am pleasant to you, but then Atisha happens to be the only one amongst all of you who knows how I really am, which one of you is going to be right? Like, which opinion is accurate?
송자다 된다 독도 가리 슈거스디 유테다 유텔미니 착바이게 니기 버루델라 가리 두고 유르슬라나 유도가 통해야 사이다 유도가 통 로직 두고 유르다.
So what's basically being said is, between seeing something and attachment arising for that thing, it is like in between. So between the attachment and seeing the thing, there is this moment of seeing it as attractive or pleasant.
대가나신기 유테다 셰단이기 빠루라 유텔미니 셰단게 니기 빠루델라 yidu miwon tong loch tuku yor.
And similarly, between seeing something and having aversion to it, there is a moment of seeing it as unattractive or unpleasant.
Ta yidu won tongya da yidu won da miwon lana ta kuni gendu duwa. yidu won tona yidu miwon tonga del nyugire yidu miwon tona yidu won tong nyugire kuni gendu duwa. So za ta kaji gi zoba zegor ta shedan ge yundi yidu miwon chakwa ge yundi yidu won geje yundi ta keran danjin da dame do bi sherani danjin gi dame do bi sheragi danjin la nyoye gi gyumjen de la jindan ge wa geje ji shegi do din nashin chadan yi de la di geje she do di yundi chadan yi ni pinjun yen bu teru res di yundi ani chakwa chombo yong에 den zo shedan gom goya shedan chombo yeden chakwa gom na jigri bes ta nyoje di dangi yor kajigi.
So because attachment and aversion have this addition of attractiveness and unattractiveness, which are then contradictory with one another, the view that is being brought up here, or the idea that the opponent has is, if you say for two things to be antidotes to each other, it's sufficient for them to have contradictory modes of apprehension. Attachment has one of attractiveness or pleasantness. Unattractiveness is the way aversion perceives its object. These two modes of apprehension contradict each other. If that was sufficient, if contradictory modes of apprehension was sufficient, then attachment becomes an antidote to aversion, aversion becomes an antidote to attachment. Someone with a predominance of attachment then should meditate or cultivate aversion as an antidote, and someone who has a lot of anger and aversion should cultivate attachment as an antidote. Wouldn't that also be the case? So that's the thinking of the opponent when they're objecting over here.
소자다 차단이게 빠루데라 유디 통메 로테다 차단게와 니기 디 빠루데라 yidu hongwa miwon tongwe logic drodigi yidu an dende lotela ngaranzu shungi nanglo la tsumi yiji namdo gi sta tangi di peje cheje tsushi mayimbo yile chebe number dog base ane yidu hongwa miwon drotas tangi di tön yung go ta ta di tön yung di tön ba digi yan samlo di nanglo la ale zawe yidu hong tongwa zamgi yidu hong tongwa da mi tongwa zamgi geje minba che 수미지 남도기 친주로도 이동 뭐 로다나 차단계지 자외 이동 통면 통통 이동도 명 통대버디 맞아 친주로 로다와 멤버 라신 유코랑게 이동 뭐 가리 여버디 통디기 면로 삼발 찍나서 차낭디 리기 여러 니신 단계 지워디 땅버다.
So because between attachment and seeing the object, or between aversion seeing something and having aversion towards it, because between both of these there is this additional state of perception that has attractiveness or unattractiveness as its quality, this addition, this in between, in the texts you find it mentioned as superimposition by inappropriate attention. And so what you'll find is inappropriate attention superimposes an attractiveness, inappropriate attention superimposes unattractiveness or unpleasantness, which then leads to these two states. Now, because we say this, or because this is something that we have heard many times, one resultant way that we end up interpreting this is merely seeing it as attractive or merely seeing it as unattractive without the superimposition by inappropriate attention is not a problem. If you see it as attractive or unattractive without this inappropriate attention that superimposes it, then there is no error. Which is why then there is in reality an aspect or a quality that always accompanies the thing that is either attractive or unattractive. And so because we have this addition of superimposition by inappropriate attention that is mentioned, there's one way that we end up feeling is, okay, attractiveness and unattractiveness are qualities of the thing. When they are superimposed by inappropriate attention, that's where the problem is. And so because this division is very common, that's why I asked earlier that question about how it comes to be.
So ngazo nyama choral zoba kabla ngazo dilen tendil ladi gorba tsumi ji namdo gi yudo on dro tas labdi ganla ani ngobo de pet yudo wonwe pet sele dene yudo wonwe wonsele dene dro ta gos ngazo dendi chorana la sinzam chigiyarta.
So earlier when we used to debate, an answer that we give very frequently in debate is what this superimposition of inappropriate attention is that it exaggerates the quality of attractiveness. We say that. And so exaggerates means like it makes it entirely attractive or it makes it entirely unattractive. And so to kind of explain what this superimposition is, often we give this answer in debate.
So that yido ngobo te yido hongwe wongsele dene drota was keje she yundu ni gengi tiwatangora ani yido hongwe tse tangbo khande shakas tangbo yido hongwe tse shana ani shini tse tele gene tashas yido hongwe tse tele gene tashas le keje she chogru was ngole yido hongwe tse koran khande shage imbas gengi di tiwatangora di tiwatang yundu ani tse shama doje ga di gorta.
So when like this answer which is given is, it exaggerates it beyond a certain limit. That's a standard, very standard answer that we all give. But when we give this answer which is inappropriate attention exaggerates it beyond measure or beyond a certain limit, if that's the answer that we give, then Gen used to say, what is the measure or what is the limit up till which this attractiveness is okay, and then what is the extra that is being exaggerated. And then as soon as this question is put forth, the limit or the measure within which attractiveness and unattractiveness is accurate, and then the extra addition is very difficult to find an answer to. And so our response would just stall at that point itself.
Ani gengi chiwaji kartangola na tene chamba chumbu ke yunde chamba tseme chamba chumbu di ke yunde anta desha cheshi di ingiru was dingola yido won thon de namju chamba chumbu no chamba tseme mage ngongi simjindel yido won thon de wa tele chamba tseme ke yunde dablo sumlo gi simjinde yido won thon go 다 다도 chamba tseme le chamba chumbu ke je she yunde ta dele gyam be tse to war Then
Gen would also ask us, he would say, and then what about like loving kindness or immeasurable love? Then immeasurable love would be like a very heightened form of attachment, because immeasurable love now has increased the extent of attractiveness and pleasantness perceived in people to a measure that earlier we didn't have. And then when you go from immeasurable love to great love, then that is even more exaggerated in the sense that you're seeing everybody without any description or any distinction as extremely attractive. So this addition of attractiveness or appealingness or pleasantness as a quality, if there was an exaggeration about its extent or its measure, then immeasurable love and great love, loving kindness would be extremely heightened states of attachment, wouldn't they?
다 잠바 첨부 귤을 깨 댕에 잠바 첨부 귤을 깨 댕에 그봐 잠바 첨부 귤을 깨 댕에 강사 안 학벌도 살았네 되게 semba 첨부 되네 상계파와 그저 그 심진 탐지 이동은 통과다.
The bodhisattvas who are on like the pure bhumis, is that what we call it? Yeah, on the pure bhumis, on the pure grounds, and Buddhas, when they look at all sentient beings, they see them as incredibly like there's a sense of closeness. So pleasant is not necessarily that you get the word. This is a word of like a sense of closeness. It feels like it's pleasant in that sense.
다간다 이동원 세고봐. 소자다 이동원 숙체시 상말을 캠네 이동원 숙체시 통행이 된도 상계다 살아내게 셈바다 된저로와. 심진 먼저 연 심진의 이동원 최종도 와. 상말의 이동원 통금민도 와. 이동원 통산나로라연 콜 이동원 체와 콜 이동원 총화세 계제여와. 다 전부 장니께 상에 되더라. 레벨 찍버로다. 이동원 세 찍버 통고로 상말라. 다야면은 건조 노래 야면은 건조 출되어 야면은 아주 출되어 다 찍니 출되어.
So for instance, so this pleasant, is it okay to use the word pleasant, but you understand what it means, right? It's like it comes, the things look with a sense of closeness. They come to, how is the other word that we use? Appealing, right? Okay. Buddhas and bodhisattvas on pure grounds, unlike us, they see everyone with the same extremely heightened measure of things being appealing or attractive or pleasant. With us, it's quite the contrary. Some people have a sense of, they look appealing or they look like they're close to us. And then even amongst, like we already divide people into some who we feel close to and others who we don't. And amongst those we feel close to, then there's also there is like a level of intensity of how much one might feel close with someone, which then suggests how appealing or unappealing they appear to you. But within appealing, then there's levels in that as well. Bodhisattvas on the pure grounds who've like perfected great compassion and great loving kindness, and Buddhas, they see everyone, every single sentient being at the same level, and that level is extremely heightened. So either they are wrong or we're wrong. One of these two is going to be wrong. So
유강의 이동원 유코랑간의 이동원 모아서 계제 셰야지 계제 셰가 침바이나 셰가 침바이나다 다 고민이 있으더라 이동원 유딩에 명원 유딩에 찬이 유딩에 양 오버 찍라 찬이 유딩에 양 오버 가가가시나 가시 이동원 유딩 가시 이동원 유딩에 다우시도와 유코랑간의 계제 셰반디 다우시도와 디다우지 임바이나 땡땡 노르데시디 상계의 전지선마도 통난 노르데시.
So if this pleasantness or appealingness or attractiveness, whatever word we use, which none of them are great, if these were qualities of things itself, then things would have, some things would be classified into those that are attractive, those that are appealing, and others that are not appealing, or single individual things would have an appealing aspect and an unappealing aspect. They would have both these qualities of appealingness and non-appealingness. And if that was the case, where these qualities of attractiveness or unattractiveness were qualities that resided in objects, but not because they were kind of relative to perception, but because they were qualities that were inseparable qualities of objects, then Buddhas and Bodhisattvas would have to be wrong, or their perception would definitely have to be inaccurate.
유간이 계제 셰미요 로기 따당간이 계제 셰여 버이나 상계의 전선바도 디디시다 체토들리지.
Whereas if this quality of attractiveness and unattractiveness was not a quality that was somehow inseparable with objects, and it was a quality that comes to be in relation to perception, then Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, one can say, is that they have attained the highest state of realization or accomplishment.
오야 다 줘봐되길래 다디 캐란도 삼무당을 치러와 디 이동 무용세 디 ngobo 코란도 ngobo 코란도 따직 두민도다 야자 당분간 야자 계제 셰보고 왔지 ngobo 코란도 이동 계제 셰지 요리 요말 ngobo 코란간 로기 토난간이 계제 멤버죠 ngobo 코란간라 계제디 여다 매 계제 셰지 라기도 라기면도 직 심주체로.
So please just consider this yourself and try and figure out which one it is. Like, are things attractive or are things pleasant or not? Just try and think about this. Don't try and add a extent of pleasure or pleasantness or how much percentage of it is genuine and how much is not, but just generally to see whether having this attractive quality or having a pleasant quality is something that objects have in and of themselves as inseparable qualities or not. Just try and make sense of this or try and reason this one out. This is sufficient. And so please try and do this as well.
다 가지기 좁아들라 랑로그 련 가르쳐래. 당진 규진 제니의 규도 지분 오버치 되자 공주 편주도 타대나의 뇌마 인시.
And so to this objection, Acharya Dharmakirti's response is, because self-grasping is a common cause, and because those things that are cause and effect, because they are things that are cause and effect, attachment and aversion, even though reciprocally different, do not harm each other.
다 제바 유직lâm 예비 차단이 진단계양스. 이내양 차단이 편준 지기지기 님보 누구르베스나 누구 말이에스. 문제비 김zen 카레라나 텔라 김zen이 꿰지. 김zen 당보텔라 니가 단진이 규르치니 끼기도 당보텔라. 그러와 so danzin gyujik jin ni tang se de tini danzin gyur yoba jikba jin bi yeshi gyumjin jikche niba dela ani chagwa yona digi shedang changgi dos ba da yu tela mi bi chagwa yona yu tela mi bi shedang changbi ngeba yoda me da yu yore ina yang bandar chagwa yona chagwa digi jela kansa dela kanda shedang chang yong gu yes indi indu 아니 거기 규칙이 세당 장기요나 차과되기 세당 장기요나 차과되기 세당은 느낌이 따라서 어디다.
So the commentary says, even though the modes of apprehension of both attachment and aversion are contradictory with respect to one object, which means in relation to one single object, the way it is apprehended by attachment is contradictory with the way that same object is apprehended by aversion. But just because of this, they are not reciprocally antidotes of each other, because both are common in having self-grasping as their cause. So because self-grasping is a common cause, saying that both of them have the same cause, which is self-grasping. And second, because they are things that are cause and effect, which means that aversion is the effect of attachment, and so they are cause and effect, which is why they are not antidotes of each other. So they are not antidotes of each other because of two reasons. One is they have a common cause, that is self-grasping. And two, they are cause and effect of each other. That's why they cannot be antidotes of each other. So attachment, whenever there's attachment, it will give rise to aversion. And so aversion is the effect of attachment, which is a cause. Now whether, if there is attachment to one single cause, there will necessarily be aversion to that same thing or that same object is to be investigated. But what's being said is, if there is attachment to one object, this will necessarily give rise to aversion. Now whether with respect to that object or not is another issue that needs to be checked. But if there is an attachment, there will be aversion. And therefore, if attachment leads to aversion or aversion comes out of attachment, they can't be antidotes of each other.
다 김진이기 나네 김진 치마데 디기도 착바다 샤당이 편준 년부 차기 말했어. 그래서 편준 년부이나 아니 착바 가지 요등이 착바 전부 요등이 미들라 샤당 게임이로 차공에로 여러와 요 말이 샤당 게디고 봐. 게디기 요바 인도 간라 게데와 좀 마세 다동 착바 코란기 게체제 샤당 펠레디 용구 요바 인도 아니 착바의 세당 년부 마인데 착백의 세당 년부 지기요는 착백의 세당 깨와라 조치기 말해 이는 착백의 세당 깨와라 조치기 요가 손자 착바의 세당 년부 조두고 말해스 디 균진 치마디기 규더 지붕 오보스 깨제디 지기도 와 디기 사모다에도 와.
So the second reason, which is that they are cause and effect, that works. Like it's understandable, because if they were antidotes of each other, then someone who has a lot of attachment or someone who is a very kind of lustful or a very, someone with a heightened sense of attachment to the sense pleasures or whatever, just a lot of attachment, such a person, they should technically have a reduced intensity of aversion. But it's not the case that happens. Instead, the more one is attached and the more attachment one has, this attachment, such a person is seen to experience equally strong states of aversion as well, but not just experience them. The way these states of aversion come to be is because of the attachment that then leads to aversion arising. So, because this aversion arises proportionate to the attachment acting as an antidote to that wouldn't work. If it were an antidote, it would have to reduce the intensity of aversion, but that's not observed. So one assists the other, and that's why the second reason, which is they are cause and effect, makes sense in showing why they are not antidotes of each other.
gyumzen thangbo di danjin gyu yo ba chikba chen be shi sa de danjin gyujin chen yi da song de di gyumzen han de sto.
Whereas this first one, which is so there's two reasons, right? One is they have a common cause, and the second is because they are cause and effect. How does them having self-grasping as a common cause or as one cause to both, how does that act as a reason to show that they are not antidotes of each other?
송상 차당이 최신스 평균 연보 마인 평균 연보 미체데 니가 라 단징이 규요 지과 진비 예처스 야면은 니가 단징이 드부 임부 총비 생에서로 저러 댄시 데리로 죽여라 댄시 디캬바 한스 그래.
So for instance, if you consider this reason, then it's kind of like the reason is being given where we're saying take attachment and aversion, it follows they are not reciprocally antidotes of each other, because they both have the same cause, that is self-grasping, or because they are both the same in being effects of self-grasping. So it sounds like this is the reason or the syllogism that's being given. How do you prove the pervasion? How do you prove the pervasion? They are not reciprocally antidotes of each other. Or they are not antidotes of each other. Yeah. They're just not antidotes of each other, to make it easier, because they both have the same cause. Because self-grasping is the cause of both.
Both are related to each other.
They're related to each other.
Attachment is related to aversion.
But the reason is because they both have the same cause. The pervasion is, if both of them have the same cause, it follows they're not antidotes of each other. Or if they're both effects of the same cause, it follows they're not antidotes of each other. The pervasion. Yeah, but how do you prove the pervasion? Like, why is there pervasion?
There's pervasion because both attachment and aversion are causally related to self-grasping, so it's only by counteracting self-grasping can they be counteracted.
That's literally the same thing that the pervasion is saying. Because gyuchi yena gyumad ta gyumado padu tini dotu gumares.
Dire.
Lendirvege.
Dire.
Yeah, that Ken's also saying that's the answer.
차당 예부디 단징기 규칙과 진행비 있어. 계시 차과 되기 셰당을 뇌나 셰당 개발을 뇌 손하다. 차과 검니 간다 파주 편중 연부 이나다. 다 편중 진단 계획은 연부 제투고 요나 차과 표현도 셰당 시고로 와. 셰당 시고로 와. 다 셰당 시고나 셰당 계획 유튜브 많이 버 찍디 가래 단징래. 디인디 단징을 뇌거다. 차과 되기 단징을 뇌거다. 차과되기 단진을 뇌 마투나 단진 규치니 깨딩이 셰당들라 마 뇌바 체도고 말해. 다가나신 셰당디기 차과를 뇌소나 차과께 중이 규자와 단진들을 뇌거래. 단진들로 마뇌나 차과디 시워 체도고 말해. 다 차단이가 이 단진 시워를 가진 체도고 말하는 네가 단진을 떼니게 되고 왔다. 네가 단진 규유에 찍어진 인디 뒤 김정이 파송이 버차기요 말해. 단달 몰라야 다가랑시.
So what you said is that because I have the same cause, the reason why they have the same cause, which then leads to them not being able to harm each other, is because if attachment was to harm aversion, then it has to also be able to harm aversion which arises from self-grasping, because an indispensable cause for aversion is self-grasping. So if one acted as the antidote for the other, along with acting as an antidote for that one, it also has to act as an antidote for the cause, which is self-grasping, because self-grasping is indispensable for aversion. Similarly, if aversion was to harm attachment, it would have to harm also the cause of attachment, because that cause of attachment is indispensable to attachment arising. Because both of these are coming out of self-grasping, harming each other is not possible without harming self-grasping as the cause, because it's indispensable to both, which is why these two by themselves cannot be antidotes for each other. So them having a cause makes them not be antidotes of each other, works like that as a reason.
가장 먼저 차고 펠레 규계제 시윤디 자와 투사디 당진레스 가장 먼저 계제 시에서 봐. 다나 신기 셰단께 유행기 자와 투사디 당진 차되고 봐. 수자 간다 당진 시월 제마도나 차고 땐도 세바디 유행이요 말다.
Yesterday, if you like the other day when we saw what the cause for aversion is, an increase in aversion is proportionate to how much self-grasping there is. Similarly, as long as you have self-grasping, that whole kind of causal presentation of how attachment arises, that also we saw. And so, if as long as there is self-grasping, these two will arise, then without working on self-grasping, you can't really get rid of attachment or aversion, because as long as that is there, these two are very closely arising in subsequent states. And so that's why without working on that cause, you can't work on them individually. So just think about this reason again, because this pervasion or the syllogism that's being given actually is, it's one of those important points that needs clarification. So just think about how to prove this pervasion again.
다디 치코런 직불라니 캬바칸데 코고도 사모당 마데바체 수수줄을 차단 깨단게 토네. 또 단진 자와진 차단 깨단게 사모도 공부다. 아니 단 차고디기 단진을 가에 뇌마도나 셰단 간데신 까도 그래. 다가나지 셰단 디기 단진 까마도나 단진 무투니 체르체르 로게 되나 차고 간데스 고도 그래. 셰단 디기 간데스 고도 사레스 그 수수줄 잔도 공부 셰난다 세고 차로 그래.
So when you do this, when you think about this, please don't think about it in terms of trying to find some kind of eloquent explanation that with words will make a lot of sense, or don't kind of get stuck at a linguistic way of talking about attachment, aversion, cause and effect. But if you just look inside, like if you kind of try and see when you experience happiness or attachment, or you experience aversion, in that moment, if you feel attachment itself arise, see whether you feel that attachment, or not feel, but like try and use this reasoning to see how a state of attachment without addressing self-grasping, how is that able to act as an antidote to aversion? And when you experience aversion without addressing self-grasping, is that aversion able to remove attachment? If you use this reasoning and you try and apply it to those moments when you recognize that they are arising, and then you use the reasoning on something that you feel or that you experience, then it's very clear, it becomes clear how they don't act as antidotes for each other.
다카지 가르라레 차단이 빈즈민이 김제들 김진이 거여와 김진이 거여는데 다 참바도 셰당라 김진이도 상임인도스 참바도 셰당이 보디 규도 지부게제요 말와 참발되는 셰당 페이르스게제 셰요 말 셰당이 참바게를 도치그르스게제 셰요 말 참바도 셰당이 보디 당진 규요 지부제레스 라요 말 셰당 당진 규요 버데 참바디 당진 규요 말 가장 먼저 닝질게제 셰사로와 디인데 아니 참바도 셰당이디 니 지기 이동원 누구도 지기 이동 미원 누구도 서도 다 참바도 셰당이 된 빈진이 부차도 살았어 딱 가지고 섬어디 참바 셰당이 님부 릭수 셰나 저버디 쯧다.
Now, after this first objection here, the second one is, okay, fine. You said that they are not antidotes of each other because they have the same cause, and because they don't harm each other, or because they have the same cause, and because, because they're cause and effect. Let's say that that's the case, but then when you talk about, say, loving kindness or love, love and aversion, they are not cause and effect of each other, because aversion is not an effect of love. Similarly, love and aversion, they don't have the same cause, which is self-grasping, because self-grasping might be the cause of aversion. But if you remember the explanation that was done earlier of how it's not a cause for love, or there's a distinction between loving kindness and attachment, and loving kindness doesn't have self-grasping as a cause, the two qualities of them being cause and effect of each other and of them having the same cause are not present with loving kindness and with aversion, on top of which loving kindness has an aspect of seeing things in a very pleasant manner or in a very appealing way, and aversion sees them in an unappealing way. And so not only do they not have the two qualities that attachment and aversion did, which is having one cause and being cause and effect of each other, on top of that they also have ways of apprehending their objects that are contradictory. So loving kindness should definitely be an antidote for aversion. That's the next thing. So they reply by saying, it is therefore reasonable for love to be an antidote to aversion. What would you say to this? How would you reply to this? Shedangi gyula nugu maris.
You are second the tone lay, so some of the
Did you look at the answer below and say it? Huh?
I mean, yes, I've read it.
So that
So the reason is that, eventually the answer is that, yeah.
so that you are the so that the tangi light chikbar sadangi shadala karsh nugu marale
So the answer is that the reason why attachment doesn't harm, love does not harm aversion is that same one from before as well.
tatanda dila jobada lenchi doa tanga zo mangchebaji shung une chebana di mazo lengelo to lengit la yu maro ta te sik samlo tang thunar ta ti si rigba dimne samlo tang thuna ngazo lol le gunge da lol charthu burti.
So the answers that are given here, even though they might not, like, you won't feel or you won't maybe kind of get an understanding of them just spontaneously, but if you think about it a little bit, so like if you concentrate and you focus on it and you think about it with a little more detail, or you think about it just with a little more attention, if you pay a little more attention to what is being said, these things you can actually come to understand them, like you can experience them.
tatanda dizu shede dizu ngone di karso gore ngazo tongni chamo so dame gorje se so de chamo de keje ke shigi mindu wa denzo de ba rigbo mangbo samlo dangni ji samlo madan lama tuye so ro de remen wa.
These arguments that you find here are not like selflessness or emptiness, which to be able to discuss it or even speak about it, you know that there's a long reasoning that's kind of, you need to be able to follow a longer line of reasoning to understand or have some idea of what selflessness is or some idea of what emptiness is or discuss it. There's that kind of way of having to think about it as well. But these arguments aren't like that. They just require a little bit of attention to something, and they're easily understandable, these arguments that we're doing now.
Di lendi lela gyuda dibu gi dodan di gyuda dibu gi dodan ani tsawi gyu ngazo khazan geje shede joro dogji gi gyu chabar chen se kogi dogji gi gyu chabar chen kharisha tsawi gyu kharisha dinde gi gyuda dibu gi namsha dodan de to se ha ko ani soso gi nyongala tisik pakar shegi ina tagarang ra thwere.
So this kind of argument that you find is like something that if you have understood or you have thought a little bit about causality and how causes lead to effects, especially how certain effects have to have indispensable causes, how some causes are indispensable, and you've thought a little bit about this, so you've reasoned this out a little bit, and now you take this understanding and through this lens, you look at your own experience, these kind of arguments are easily understandable. They're not so hard to understand.
Pena 맞아 차와슈 전부 바르나다 나 로점니 차와바기 나래 참반 나지 차와버긴 딱한테 깽 가리는 딱한테 차와로지 바수나 맞아 맹한을 누구로와 답변나 수불 년가도 스타치 맹한을 차와바르 맹한 로윤데 암지디기 차와맹념도 인지 민지 년좀 뒤기도 봐 antibody 디 암지디기 antibody 디 마테바지 차와맨치 뿌테는 디기로 가시나나 차와디기 딱딱 차와맨디기 차와맨데도 차와니디 단도 잠바도 셰당나 히루와 레 말에 차와맨데 사와이나 따다고로 차와 시를 펜포고도 와 디 창매 하고고 디시는 그런 민고 디 차와맨라고 그러다 차와 바르딩들 디 차와맨 떼고라 암지기 디지 뿌테는 디고로 년좀 마tin 디기로 년좀 가진 떼고라.
For instance, if you have an infection and you have fever, and then you go to a doctor, along with giving you like a paracetamol or something that reduces your fever, they also give you an antibiotic. Technically, it's okay to give give something that reduces your fever, because the problem is fever. You're going there with the symptom of fever. Fever and paracetamol are like love, loving kindness, and aversion. But instead of just saying, take this kind of fever suppressant or take a paracetamol, the reason that doctors end up giving you an antibiotic is exactly the same thing that's being discussed over here. It's not so hard.
So the 처음에 가져 사바이나 할은 추지 시가 웍 추지 시르도다. normal work 디가래 추지 툭 말해. 추지 툭스라고 와. 추지 툭인가 차와 차도 그래. 디젤이야 차와 파리용 그래. 야 차와면지서 야 추지 툭차. 차와면 가져봐도 사도. 다 암지하고 거로다. 그 차와 바래기 규차와디 년가디 바 하고 그 여바이디 년가디 며 마소나 차와면 가져 당바 있나 간다. 차와 땐도 시워디 융해매버디 그 암지하고 거로. 디신에다 암지기 같이 거래. 암지기 차와 시에기 님보텔라 땐도 차와 시에기 님보텔라 오늘 고랑 차와 시에기 님보텔라 년좀도 딴 거로 봐. 다 카두들라 차와 파르데기 둥게도 뭐냐면 쳐도 차와면 되고 봐. 다가라로 봐. 소자 가도 잠바 가지고 검색에 있는 디기 세당 맞자기래. 이제 세당 때도 시버 제도구로 해서는 제도구 말해. 가지나는 세당 계획이 규디 차와파의 규년가 임만하신 세당 파의 규디 당진들 봐. 당진 예배ring 될라 계란 세당 게임 거다. 남치면 세당 게임 거 봐. 빠 당진 때도 세당 때도 시버 제국이 요나 커도 거로 당진을 내기 멘트 땅 거로 마도 셴바 탑시 가야요 말어. 디인디 아니 잠바디 세당 인연 부리기 위해서는 리기 말했어. 가지 리기 말했을란 아니 랜디 겸버 장소 모다 게메 신도녀바 차르주면서 어디 숨이요.
So it's kind of the same thing. If you take a paracetamol, what is it, 4 to 6 hours it lasts, the effects of it? Yeah? And then after that it comes back, and then you take another one, then it comes back again. This being the case, when you get prescribed by the doctor gives you an antibiotic, and they give you paracetamol. The reason why they give you an antibiotic is because they know that if you were to keep popping paracetamol, it will only last for a certain amount of time. Your fever would come back. To be able to remove fever or to cure fever, let's go like that. To cure fever, they know that if it's coming from an infection, you have to address the infection. They know that, right? So it's that connection of what is immediately helping and what is actually required to cure that fever entirely is something that they're acutely aware of. So what they do is, the actual treatment is the antibiotic that you get to clear the infection that led to the fever. But because in the immediacy the fever is overwhelming, you get something to address the immediate fever as well. So you get treated in both ways. It's exactly the same here. If aversion is a problem and you keep generating loving kindness, for a while that works, but then when the intensity of that thing declines, the other one just comes back naturally, effortlessly. And so if you want to find a way to cure that or pacify that, remove aversion, the cause that leads to aversion, where it has come from, is self-grasping. Without addressing self-grasping, you can't do away with self-grasp without aversion or attachment, whatever it is. So that's exactly what's being said here. What they're saying is, in the same way that paracetamol is going to address your symptom of fever but not cure it, loving kindness is addressing your aversion as a symptom, but it's not curing it, because like the infection was the cause of fever, the indispensable cause of aversion is self-grasping. Without touching that or without addressing that, you can't get rid of it. Some days, at some point, in some moment, as long as self-grasping is there, aversion will come up. Which is why over here, their response is, because love, etc., are not contradictory with delusion, they cannot sever the great faults.
다 잠소 몽다 gelme 칠세기 몽바도 개와 요 말에세기 몽바디 가리레스라나 몽바디를 디시게 하던 로변 속에 가가가 고와 여바인디 단다 데 몽바디 가리를 시기 위해서나 몽바디 가리를 시기 위해서나 싸와 치만이 되기 니군 대인 싸와지 대인 직소 따와 인스 직달라니 마릭바세 직달라 몽바 마릭바세 어디 시게지
Now, because it says, because love, etc., are not contradictory with delusion, with respect to what delusion is, it's a separate word, okay? Because delusion has different ways that it's explained by different masters and different ways of thinking about it. To clarify what this delusion is, the last two lines over here clarify what exactly this delusion refers to, and it says, the root of all faults is the view of transitory collection.
What is never tamjigi zawayin dekin jigsola tawas or te tanda kabdir chansomonda gemi chirsegi mongba or tilshigi yores.
So the root of all faults is the view here of the transitory collection, which is the view of transitory collection is this delusion that is being said is not contradictory with love and those other states.
So that chamsomonda gemeji shindu nyeba sajumin tsiganibu digi ma tenda ningbu tunsha yu digi karit tengorlana manzu shuk gyapsa di ta kandar chasola sobe nyeba teda chige yena dinzugi ta kandar simgyu mashibu chigidu ngone simgyu magibu chayadi digi chagidu seji an di shibu ngegi samlo yodengeji yimba yina shuk gyapsa di dame se di resta di tingi yorta manzola.
So what this verse is very clearly saying is, if you find that there are certain mental states that are disturbing one or that are disturbing me, and you want to do away with them or you want to cure them, amongst all the various things that you can do, the one that is absolutely indispensable is realizing selflessness. So it's very clearly saying, if you are dissatisfied or you are overwhelmed or you are unhappy with the current mental state that you have and you want to fix it, the only thing that you have to ensure that you address is selflessness. This is very clearly being stated here.
Ta tanda bardo dame gomya machung bache ina ya dame gomya machung bache ina ya nga di gomgi di practice chigu lai so naga practice che thanga che mangbu yo ba ina adi so khani ro jarlana antibody sagan is so odi is logo gorda
Whereas so please pay attention to this or recognize this, because along with making this statement, what it's saying is, and if up till now in the course of your life, you have done this practice, this practice, this practice, this practice, but you haven't cultivated selflessness, and that's something that has been sidestepped and you've done everything else, that way of practicing is like popping paracetamol when you have an infection that's leading to fever and you're hoping that will fix your problem. It's not possible. So please pay attention to this verse. All that other practices, if it's not leading to selflessness or is not accompanied by selflessness, is not connected in any way to selflessness, then that practice is literally like paracetamol.
Ro ta nyenju me masaba cheji me shamba da me da sadir da supplementary sadir da shamba taga chi kharin sadir gorta ina nyenju me di che sayo marta and da naza di shiye da samuro khoji da kangi di thwe samuro khoji da dinde de dinge ro ji yorta da tanda soso dinde na de sudinge ro ji ba ngunji thu bo che da dame gom yung gome chung me wa ina
So if one hasn't paid attention to selflessness, or one hasn't tried to understand it and cultivate it, it's kind of like having a strong infection, but without addressing that infection, trying to take do symptomatic treatment, or take vitamin supplements or mineral supplements, or do lifestyle changes which are not ever addressing the real problem. And so it's kind of like having a big underlying problem, which is this infection that needs to be addressed, and doing all sorts of other things, and resting in that state of being complacent or satisfied by working on these kind of, do we say palliative? Yeah? It's like palliative treatment or palliative care, and being satisfied with that. So if whatever we do never touches selflessness, it's not something that has any sort of precedence in our mind, or is not primary, but we're all doing other things and we're concerned with those, and we're satisfied with the other things we're doing. It's like someone who has a serious infection but is happy kind of taking supplements, and when they feel fever taking a pill now just to reduce that, and be satisfied with that. If that's how we are, then it's worthwhile recognizing, or at least seeing that that is the state that we are cultivating right now. So please pay attention and see whether that is the state that we are in right now or not.
다 차와 여버디 가서 수소 랍도 그래. 가 차와 버듯이. doctors do 강연 가르도라는 가서 당보들랑 가 차와 버도 라투고도 가서. 이제 년가 여버디 가서 라투고면도 봐. 디 doctor기 얘기도 봐. 체크체 야메나 ultrasound 체크 가리치기는 직체제 아 걔랑 년가 디디도 스타트 체크니 infection dos doctor기 얘기도 봐. 디나 신체제 간조라 년가도 차와니가 여번나시 간조라 년가도 자와 당진대다 차와도 자와 셰당 디 간조를 열다 다 셰당다 차고 여어딘 간조 딜라우 소로 지로 다 간다 간조 수수적이 깨지 씹어나시 지로 얘네 디 툭사디 ngal thugudu se di ngaju mangbu chegi tini di khata thugu yo mar ta di ani doctor da dawa di tomba sangi chumni degi o di thugsa di ngal thugudu ote laprta.
The fact that we have fever, like the symptom of fever is something everyone knows. That's kind of why you go to the doctor eventually. So you have fever, you go, you might not know what causes that fever. So if you have an infection and you're unaware of that infection, then you know that the fever is there, you go to the doctor, and when they ask you what your problem is, you say, well, I have fever. You might not be able to connect that to an infection, which is the role of the doctor. And so then whatever they do, whatever kind of diagnosis they do, whether it's through blood or whether it's through another form of investigation, if they can find out that the cause is an infection, then you know that the fever is resulting from that infection, and you know that until that infection is addressed, that fever cannot be done away with. Similarly, the infection here is like self-grasping, or the view of the self, and the fever is comparable to attachment and aversion. Now, we can feel that we have attachment and aversion. We also see that that does make the mind unhappy or restless or dissatisfied. But connecting that to where it's coming from, or how that is associated to the view of the self, much like the doctor is the one that shows that to us, that's the role of the Buddha, which is saying, oh look, if you have these symptoms that you can now see are difficult, or this is what's creating difficulty for you, this is all coming from the view of the self. So as long as you think there is a self, these will arise. And so it's very comparable to that.
어디르도와 손잔다 다 년조 마산나야 차와면 사딩이다 간다 매직다 사가치고라 차와시 얘기체도 야구르와 또 차와면 고런 마상에 차와 바이는데 차와면 고런 마사체 아니 차와면 세선 차와면 세기면서 아니 차와 바디도 아니 니제 캔도 대딩이 릭지긴 구르와 또 어디 가릴라나 심규 마시와 체경기 아니 자위 중사기 년가소도기 당진디체 디니 딜레 우도 큐르디기 차와도 잡아 샤단디체 이내야 디기 년보대야 인중기 년 자위 년보대 때마도 커두 샤단기 년보대야 매버체 아니 어디든지 유럽에나 차와바도 간라 매마사바체 아니 저게 룽고로알 대대야 서로 고로 추통모 장 대대게 서로 저러 다 어디 제대게 서로 어디 가르쳐 되길라나 아니 샤당 인연보임에 당정 인연보임에 샤당 인연보임에 아니 지금 뭐기 버청하다 아니 지로를 참도 조고지 깨다 루루체 타마도 동 알아도 동 근데 스키브 찬 대딩 리스도 어디로
But okay, so that's the one level. Then there's another level which is still kind of more coarse, which is if you have fever, but you don't want to even take a medicine to reduce that fever, and instead of addressing that symptom as well, you kind of want to sit in a cool place, or you put, that cold pack on the head. You do things like that. It's like, forget addressing the root, which is the infection. You don't want to address the symptom as well, and you just want to do absolutely things in the immediacy to just feel slightly good. That kind of attitude is comparable to someone who is not concerned with the cause of our mental discomfort. But when we are troubled by aversion, instead of trying to find also an immediate kind of suppressant for that aversion, instead of doing that, you kind of try and distract yourself, or you go for a walk, or you hang out in company, or you have a drink, or you have a smoke to kind of reduce that just a little bit. That's comparable to the person who's got fever, they've got a high temperature, they're not concerned with finding out where it's from, or if they found out, they're not concerned with addressing the infection, they're not concerned with addressing the symptom, and they're looking for some immediate slight cool sensation just to temper it a little bit. That's comparable to that. So amongst how our attitudes are as people, it's either one of these three.
오더 드리셔 딘데다 데 당다 데 마송데 딘조기 된다 가레스 된다 닝부도 마 도르드나 가리송고르시도 당길랍디에디 소장가조 가리 냠낸 최고 쪼 가르래 아니 샤도 쇼르 최고에 가르래 이예와 세부 슈친 땡기도 보다 다디 이예와 세부친의 땡 차비 제라 아니 쪼 가리 임바디 nga 지김에 이엘라들랑 nga 중니 되긴 라바이나 다 소소 삼노래 와 또 디나라 대세 세부 잡사선다 조 디르다스다 디메나니 요 말에서 줌진도 제 시에서로 셴바 가르치기는 디 용구 말다 미용 줌진 디레스 세우 라서와 다 디라 삼로당 쩌바 쩌 리바 삼로당 도스탄 사마 하 고차비 젤라 땅아 냠는 제가도 가르치가 আস라디 당기 중는 시에서기 조 깨져 시에디 디파 낭메서로 심부 시에제 디 모임이 셴바 가르치에메로 셴바 가르치 제고면도 세기 두로 수르니 파두고 여바이나 다 가르쳐버렸다. 다음지기 랍사리 창마 라서 계란 차와봐야지 년가도 년가디기면 디레 창마 랍사비 제라는 가 수수수 라 땅은 년가면 성이면 차오면서 되기는 수수 타지고 제스게요 막.
So if you kind of look at these verses, it's amply clear, like there's not much room for doubt about what is being said. And what's being said is, look, this is the antidote. These are all other things that you can do that can help along the way. What this means is, this is the main practice. These are secondary practices that you can do that strengthen or accompany it. This is the main thing that has to be addressed. It's very clear what Acharya Dharmakirti is saying. There's no mincing words here. If after having understood this, one has studied this, has reflected on it, has debated it, and has thought about it, and now we still have the doubt about what should I practice, or what practice should I do, it's kind of like you've gone to the doctor, you know that you have a symptom, you found out that that symptom is because of an infection, and now you have been told this is the only way that this infection can be healed, but you say, what else is possibly there for me to fix it? And so if that kind of thought is arising where I know what the problem is, I've understood where it comes from, and I know that this is the only thing that there is to do, and everything else is secondary, but my question is, what should I practice now? it's kind of like you know where it's coming from, you know what the problem is, but you're still looking for some other kind of way to remedy the situation. And so if that's the attitude that you have, then there's not much to do. You can't do anything. If that's how you find yourself, or if that's how someone finds themselves thinking, saying, I know that there's an infection, I know that to cure this infection, this is the only way, but I don't want to cure it. I'm going to take paracetamol every time I have a bit of fever, and it'll be fine. Then for that kind of situation where you're completely aware of what's happening, but you've taken an active decision to not address the main thing, asking about what to practice or wondering what one should practice, suggests that there isn't really much anything left to do. So that's quite straightforward.
다양 년좀디 공천부 쉬부지체 단다 뉴에기 무민도스 디인도 다 리식가 차오면 산에 되는마도 탑시게면도스 이내 땅 뮤직 탑시체네 간다 년좀지도 사고래 세 상무 요딩에도 진바이나 단다 가론 뢰기 다음에 직 상무 단계 요디 직로기 당기민도스다 뢰기 직바이나레 왕고이나레 가리네 차네 직 당기민도스 소자다 단당가 슈게베디 참바단 된데간라 슈게나마도 탑시스게면도스 이나야 다메간라 슈갸사데 다메간 임바스 간다직 슈 마음바 제거에디 디고랑갈 인세 로 수르지 여바이나 야 오스타가 테스타가 지레다 단다 디소로 차고 시츄에이션 디로 차시기로.
But it's also true that one situation might be like, there is this treatment that will fix my condition, but it's expensive, or I don't have time right now to do it. And because I'm unable to do it right now, I know that that's what I eventually have to do, but for the time being, because the symptoms are overwhelming and I can't, for whatever my situation might be, address the infection itself, for now I will take whatever treatment I can to cure my fever or to reduce my fever, keeping well in mind that at some point I'm going to have to go and address this infection. That attitude is kind of like, I know that I have to address self-grasping, I know that I have to address this view of the self, but right now I'm unable to because I can't understand it, because my capabilities are not there, because my time is restricted or limited. And so for the time being, what I want to do is I want to at least not be overwhelmed by these states, and so I'll cultivate loving kindness or whatever other secondary practices are there, while however keeping in mind that if I know that to be able to address it, I need to eventually make an effort on removing this view of the self. It's just that for now, for whatever my reason or my situation is, I can't address it. That is still a better attitude to have, because in the long run eventually it'll lead you to being able to get there. So that's still slightly better as far as an attitude goes.
That's how means mapping. Yeah, younger men shambajisa mapping, younger men mangusa mapping. Mapping nangazo amjizal dumar, and yagone. Tang a design pemason, design saji. Ko yalagi me manguj saba inaya. Sawa di bed, sawa that me company dam in the saba is in the sawa traumas, load the traumas, tatung lo yadigidus. Was a kitchen dugurota, amjizal dogorota. So that the drawing Kadu di chedi digi, then to Shigimewa Hakonanga to Zawa dealer, that Zawajil Pingimewa Indi, Zawajil Koi Nebaji Drugumeva Indi, and Uzu gave Tiko, Zawa Koran and New the Magic Tabshianga Rodig to Tanga, the Shigal just the dog Euro Tangadola.
But then again, it's a little bit also true that as our attitude, or like generally our personality is one of, look, I took this medicine, it didn't work. I took this other medicine, it didn't work. I took medicine made by this kind of pharmaceutical company, that wasn't strong enough. I took this kind of combination, it didn't work. And we do have this attitude of being kind of dissatisfied with not being cured entirely, but with just being able to suppress symptoms now and then, which then very naturally results us to go to the doctor and say, look, I took this medicine, I took this one, I did this, but it keeps coming back. Because that's a kind of very innate kind of attitude that everyone has, we find that if we can't fix something thoroughly or entirely, we do remain somewhat dissatisfied.
Dinashin anzo lamazal don the lagonge rosta. Nga chamjam doing and Sule Ranja di Yungudus, Tim Daga doing Sule Ranja Yungudus. Togotomonium do Kalasaga droys, and the Kiwchamasons, Kiwsinga Kiwchas, the Yaranja Suligidus. Di lao na shani ngi di gombai 레디네 큐큐스마도 야 랑잘레디기도 딱 가르쳐 버렸어. 오늘은 엔데도 남과 슈궁으로 좀 돼요.
So doesn't it kind of suggest that then when you go to a lama or to someone who you seek advice from or someone who's instructing you, it would be the same thing, no? Like, I tried to relax, it didn't work. I spent time here, it didn't work. I was doing this, it didn't work. I tried to practice this thing, it worked for a while, but then it came back. I meditated on this for a while, it came back. It should be kind of like that, no? Where you say, well, I've done this, it worked for a bit, then it came back. I did this, it worked for a bit, they came back. Technically, we should be doing the same thing. So these kind of points here are worth considering or trying to reflect on. If you can memorize this root verse and then recite it every now and then, that also has, it's quite, I guess, as a reminder, or it's quite potent. These two verses, which were because self-grasping is a common cause, and then the next one, because love, etc., are not contradictory with the illusion, they cannot serve a great faults. These ones are, if you can keep them in mind and like understand and think about them, it's quite helpful. So if every now and then you have a doubt about, I wonder what I should be practicing, or I wonder what now teaching I should receive, or what instruction I should seek and what I should receive, if you have this doubt, in that moment, if you can recite these verses, it'll kind of steer or might give you better perspective of what to do.
Last one, that ding 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 ding. Yeah.